Hello everybody, it's Stephen here and Walter for So Chatty, episode number 12 for June the 11th, 2021. And today we're going to talk all about feet, knowing your feet. Your sewing machine comes with a lot of feet usually. The more expensive machines tend to come with more feet, but there are many, many feet available. And most times people look at them and go, I don't know what to do with that, and never bother to attempt anything with these other feet. Now, we're not going to try to cover every foot that's out there for a sewing machine. We're going to cover the ones that we use most common, or the ones that we use most of the time, and show you how we use them. And we're looking at this in two parts. Walter's going to look at the feet he uses for garment making and how he uses those. And he's also going to look at the buttonhole attachment, because a lot of people are afraid of the buttonhole attachment. And once you've used it, you'll want to use it all the time. And then, in the second half of today, I'm going to look at the feet I use most commonly, and I'm going to look at especially the Accu-feed system, or the dual feed system as they call it, on the Janome machine, because that's something that is unique to Janome products as well. Although I think a few of the other ones might have these too, don't they?
Yeah.
I think Bernina has their version of it.
Yeah, I think each manufacturer has their own version of it, and they're usually on the more higher end type machines.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you can, well, first of all, with Janome, you have to have one of the higher end machines in order to use theirs. I'm not sure about the other brands, but in a way, they are. Some people just think it's a glorified walking foot, but there's a little bit more to it than just that, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm also going to show you a very unique tool that isn't actually a foot, but it allows you to do some really cool things with your decorative stitches and sewing circles. So we've got a lot packed into this today, so we're going to get right into it with Walter's segment here, just as soon as I switch the camera over.
Okay, I'm just going to talk today about a few of the regular feet that I use when I'm sewing. And I'll start with this foot here. On my machine, it's called an F foot, and I have a Janome 9mm machine. So if it's a Janome 9mm machine, it's an F foot. And it's just a clear foot with a red dot in the center that shows where the needle position is. And the edge of the foot is, if the needle is in the middle position, the edge of the foot is actually at 3/8 of an inch when the needle's in the center position. So if I guide along the edge, I'll get a 3/8 inch seam, or I can position it anywhere I need to when I'm doing stitching. So another foot that I use a lot is what is often called as a quilting foot. On my machine, it's a O foot for the 9mm Janome, and it has an edge guide on the edge of this foot. And many quilters use this as to aid in their 1/4 inch seam.
Can you just show us that edge part a little bit more clearly?
Yeah, there's a little guide there. I don't know. Is that showing it okay?
Turn it. There. That's good. Just hang on to it for a second. Okay, that's good. Yep.
Okay. Now, each machine, if you have a regular machine, you may not have this foot. It often comes with quilting machines that have quilting feet, but they're optional on some other machines, so you should be able to get it. But anyway, I use this foot a lot as well. And again, it's to give me if I have the needle in the middle position, then it will also give me a 3/8 of an inch seam on the edge. And it's handy because it'll help me guide my fabric to get an even stitch all the way down. I can also set this to the 1/4 inch, just the needle position in the 1/4 inch as a quilter would normally do. And it helps me get a 1/4 inch top stitch when I'm doing a garment sewing as well. So I use this one quite a bit. Okay, and another one that I use that has a guide is what is on Janome is a G foot on the Janome 9mm. And as you can see, the guide is in the center of the foot and not on the edge. And foot is called a blind hem foot. Some people call it a stitch in the ditch foot, but it's not actually a stitch in the ditch foot. It's called a blind hem foot. And most machines come with these feet. Now what I use this foot for is, depending on where I position my needle, either on the left or the right side, it gives me a nice even close to the edge stitch of 1/8 of an inch. So I use that frequently to put on things like pockets, edging on pockets, and edging on getting a straight stitch all the way down on my button band. So I use that quite often.
Okay, so any other ones that you want to show us today?
Well, today I'm also going to show you the buttonhole foot.
And this is the Intimidator.
Yeah, people get uptight about these, but it actually gives you, has an automated stitch on the machine that helps you create a neat looking buttonhole. And on this foot, you put a button in the top where, in the guide, you can put any size button in there, and it will create a buttonhole sized for this button.
We're going to show that in a few minutes. So we'll just hang on to any more details about that until we get to actually putting this on the machine.
Now, the only other machine I use that I don't have is other machine. One that I have that I use frequently is the zipper foot, and this helps me put in a zipper. I won't be showing that today, but it usually comes with most machines. So it has a special foot to help you guide you putting in a zipper.
Okay, so with the exception of the zipper foot, these are the feet we're going to go over in your segment today, keeping in mind we're talking about garment making. So which one are you going to show us how to use first?
Well, I'm going to start with the one that I call the 1/4 inch foot to show you what kind of, why I would be using this for garment sewing.
Okay, so let's see how you attach that to the sewing machine then.
Okay, this has these attachments on this particular machine is a snap attachment. Most modern machines come with snap attachments. So I just place it on the bed here, and there's a little bar there, and it clicks into the foot like that. So it's now attached.
Okay, so now what?
So now what I do is, if this needle is in the middle position as it is right now, it will give me if I guide the fabric along the edge.
And you say on the edge of the little guide, that black.
Yeah, the little black
metal.
If I have the edge of the fabric that I'm sewing, and I place it against that edge of the black edge here, and I start to sew, this guide will help me stay in line with the edge of the fabric. So I'll just start to sew, and because I'm in the middle position, I will get a very neat 3/8 inch hem.
Okay, and a 3/8 of an inch hem is fairly standard in garments.
Well,
right?
So far most of the garments I've been sewing require a 3/8 inch seam. Some garments require a 5/8 inch seam, and of course this wouldn't be of any help to you. You would have to figure out how you can guide that on your machine. But for this particular thing, the 3/8 inch seam works good for me.
So that's with your needle in the middle position.
Right.
If you move the needle over to the right, does that give you a 1/4 inch seam?
Yeah, there's a special stitch on this machine that will give me a 1/4 inch. And now it's set, my machine is set to the 1/4 inch, right? And most quilters use this. So, but the only difference in 1/4 inch, it gives me the needle's in the 1/4 inch position. So then if I need to, often on shirts, I need to top stitch a 1/4 inch. So I'll use this to give me a nice straight top stitch. So this is how I do that. And here I've got a nice, fairly straight top stitch, which is nice on the outside of the garment. It gives you a nice straight line by using that guide.
Okay.
Now, if I use the clear foot, it's easier to deviate from the edge of the fabric, and you end up having maybe not being able to get as nice a straight line as this.
Okay. So that's a very handy foot. And does that one usually come with a sewing machine, or does that an option?
This comes with many sewing machines, but sometimes the lower end machines may not have that foot, and it becomes an option.
But then, so you'll have to go to your dealer or go online and order one. Those kind of feet, usually, what do they run in price?
I don't think they're very expensive. 10 maybe $15.
Yeah. So you can get one, but believe me, they are a godsend with that guide on the side. Okay, so what's the next foot you're going to show us how to use?
Okay, the other foot that I use a lot.
If you can get it off.
Actually, I have a button at the back. I just have to find the button, and I just push the button, and the foot falls off. Is my what I call blind hem foot, and I use this a lot for edging button bands and edging my pockets, because I need a stitch that goes really close to the edge. And what happens is I can use, depending on what my needle position is, I can get it to edge on either side of the fabric. So,
just by moving your needle position.
Yeah. So what I'll do here is I'll attach this one. And here the guide's a little different. It's in the middle of the foot, right? So if I want to edge a piece of fabric on here, hold it down here, I'll move my needle position. Right now, if I push it against the guide here, my needle position is way over here. So what I have to do is I have to move my needle position over. So what I usually do is I move it down to about 1. And that gives me a really close to the edge stitch. Right, so I've got it set here. The needle's over, I've got my edge guide here, and then I do a quick stitch down the side here, and I get a very nice, very close to the edge stitch.
Yes, I see that. So that's what, about 1/8 of an inch?
This one might be a tiny bit more than 1/8 of an inch, but I often use that one to give me a nice close stitch that way. I mean, I could probably move it over. I don't know. I don't really want to experiment today.
You can place the needle pretty much anywhere you want, depending on how close to the edge you want to get.
Yeah.
I suppose the smallest increment is down to a perfect 1/8 of an inch.
Yes, that's true. So I've got it at 1. Sometimes I have it at 1.2, depending on how close I want the stitch to be. Mm-hmm. So that's really 2 of the feet that I use that a lot of people might not think to use it for this purpose, right? To the 1/4 inch foot and this blind hem foot is used as a guide to get you straight stitches.
For a top stitch.
For a top stitch.
Which is a stitch that a lot of people are going to notice because it's a finishing stitch on a garment. And if you're using a thread color that's going to stand out from your fabric color, you don't want to look like a little zigzag.
But the
you want it all to be very neat.
The 1/4 inch foot, I also use. Remember, when the needle's in the middle position, it gives me a 3/8 of an inch. My inside seams have to be 3/8 of an inch on a garment too, so I will sew them on the inside as well, not just top stitch.
So those 2 feet, between the 2 of them, give you quite a variety of stitching. When you're doing straight stitching, that'll give you the exact measurement that you need. Okay, so what's that take us to next?
The buttonholer.
Okay, now this is the gizmo that's very intimidating to look at, but it is, if you're going to do garment sewing, it's an absolute must. So explain this.
Okay, this buttonholer comes in two pieces. I think it's optional to use the bottom piece, but I've always used the bottom piece. The bottom piece helps stabilize your fabric. So what you do is you put this top piece on the bottom piece, and you put your fabric in between it, and then to create the buttonhole.
Okay, well, let's create a buttonhole. Show us how you would set this up to do a buttonhole.
Okay, so I've got it so that my button that I'm going to be using, this is a standard shirt style button, an 8L button. And I've got that in this little vise that
How
holds
did you get it in there?
very carefully. This thing is not easy to open. That's the only complaint I have about it.
I thought you'd loosened off that screw on the end of it.
No.
Okay, why is there a screw on the end of it?
Okay, the screw on the end of it, if you've created a buttonhole, you have this L and S. You can screw this in so that if it's in the middle position, it's the standard size for the buttonhole. If you want it a little bit smaller, if you want it a little bit larger, you move this guy to the L. If you want it a little bit smaller, you move it towards the S.
Okay.
It will customize your button size, buttonhole size for that.
All right. So you
So
got your button.
I've got my button. This is a standard shirt front size button. You can put it, I think you can go up to about a 1-inch button to put in here. You put it in this little vise, and center it and push it shut. And it holds the button in it, and it'll create a buttonhole for that size of button.
Okay, so you don't have to figure out the size of your buttonholes because this will do it automatically for you depending on the button you put in that spot. Okay, so then what do you do?
Then I take my old foot off, and I put this buttonhole foot in. See, it has a bar just like a regular foot on it, right? A regular foot has this little bar, and you just slide the bar, the buttonholer underneath the machine and onto the bar, so it's like it's a big foot.
Okay, so in other words, it attaches just like a regular foot attaches.
Yeah. Now there's some specialty things about this, is that this machine you have to go to your buttonhole setting on the machine. So I have to switch to the mode, and I have to remember what my buttonhole number is. Nope. Buttonhole. Okay, that's my buttonhole number. You can see on this machine it shows you it's going to do a buttonhole. I don't like the standard settings for the buttonhole, so I've changed it. I've got it written down here on my buttonholer what I use, what I like to use. So I've got it set at 4 width and a length of.
Now this will depend on the individual sewer.
Yeah.
It's your personal preferences. So we don't need to get into your personal preferences because what we want to see is how the buttonholer makes a buttonhole.
Okay, so there's another thing that comes on this machine for the buttonholer, and it's this little thing that pulls down. It's stuck on the machine, so it never comes off, and it slides down in front of the buttonhole.
And what's the point?
The point of that is it helps the machine know when to stop sewing on the buttonhole.
Okay. So you have the buttonholer device is attached. You've got the buttonhole lever or whatever that thing is called pulled down, and now you're putting in your fabric. You've already set up the machine settings for making a buttonhole.
I would normally, when I'm making a shirt, I would figure out where the center point is of where the button's supposed to go and where its position's supposed to be on there. So there's a little window here, and I would figure out where the center of the button should be. There's little guides here, and it would and center that position of where the buttonhole is supposed to go from the shirt. So that way it will figure out exactly where it's supposed to be.
Okay. So when you put your fabric under there, now I notice there's a steel part sticking out here. Where'd that come from?
That's part of
That's the bracket, right?
the bracket underneath, right?
Oh, okay.
So I slide my cloth between the two, between the buttonholer and the bracket.
Okay.
It's what they call a stabilizer plate. It helps keep the fabric from moving back and forth while the buttonhole is being sewn. So I just put the foot down in the down position, and then I get the machine to start sewing the buttonhole.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't do anything. Machine's doing all of this, and it sews the button.
So you're not even guiding the fabric?
No. It even stops and cuts the thread for me.
Okay, so we now have a buttonhole, with the exception of you actually have to cut the fabric in between all that stitching, right?
Yeah.
But there you go. How quick and easy is that? And you also know, because he mounted the button in the back, that this is the right size buttonhole.
Right.
Okay. So you don't need to be intimidated by that.
Yeah, just as an example, I'll show you. Just show you quickly that I did this on this shirt yesterday. I did all the buttons. They're not very easy to see from the back and from the front, all the buttons.
Okay.
It's probably not a good example for a thing. I drew a line down the center to help me position all the buttonholes.
And your line is,
It's a little pink line here.
Okay, yep.
And it helps me guide where the buttonholes have to go. And it's the standard size button hole, and I have the standard size button here.
Now, did you sew the buttons on with the sewing machine, or did you sew those on by hand?
I sewed it on with the sewing machine.
Okay. And that is something I really like, because I hate sewing on buttons, and so I will use the sewing machine. We're not going to show you how that works. It's very easy to figure it out.
So that's showing you it goes through the standard size buttonhole.
Okay. So we've seen 3 feet that most people may not know about, or may be intimidated by in some cases, but there's no need to be intimidated, especially by the buttonholer. In fact, once you've used it once, you'll find lots of uses for it as well, and the versatility of those other 2 feet too. So, anything else you want to tell us about feet in general?
Just that the machine usually comes with a variety of feet, various things, and they're called for different things, and they're used for different purposes. And
those things will be listed in your manual.
But I wouldn't necessarily stick with it, using it for just that one purpose. Think outside the box and use them for different purposes. Like I've showed you today about using the 1/4-inch foot for top stitching as a guide, and the blind hem foot to help stitch close to the edge of your fabric.
Now, there's tons of other specialty feet as well available, and we don't have some of those. Like there's rufflers and things for couching and for doing piping and things like that. But those are very specialized types of feet, and not part of our scope today, but maybe down the road, well, we have to learn how to use them too. So that's feet for garment sewing primarily. Now we're going to switch over, and I'm going to talk about the ones that I use for quilting, and talk about the Accu-feed system on the Janome. I'm going to show you the feet that I use on my M7 quite a bit, that a lot of people don't understand how to use. Now, this system here is called the Accu-feed system on the Janome, or the dual feed system. Interchangeable, those two terms. And these are actually walking feet, but with the Janome M7 and other models as well, these will work on some of the other models that are 9mm in size. These are really great when you're quilting, especially if you have multiple layers of fabric. These will help feed the fabric through your system very evenly. Now, the Janome M7 also has 12 feed dogs, which is the most feed dogs of any of their sewing machines, which also helps with this process. But as I said, these are available for some of the other 9mm machines. Now, there are 3 feet that come with this, and I'm going to show you what each one does. One's an open toe, one is a 1/4 inch edge foot, and this is a stitch in the ditch foot. And then there's 2 sizes of whatever you want to call them, bases, I guess. And this one, for example, is actually a 1/4 inch foot as well. So there are 2 1/4 inch foots in this set, or feet, I should say. And this one is the one I'm going to be using with these attachments. And then I'm going to also show you this little device, which is kind of on the pricey side when you buy it. And it's specific to whatever machine you own in the Janome line, but other lines of sewing machines have this as well. And this is the circular sewing attachment, they call it. And I'm going to show you how that works too, because you can get some really neat effects using this particular device with your feet and your decorative stitches. So I'm going to have to set up right now on my sewing machine to show you all of this. So that's what I'll do next. So the first foot I'm going to show you is this one, which I can't live without. It's my 1/4 inch foot. Now, this is a fairly standard foot. It does come with some of the Janome sewing machines, and what makes this special is that it has this little edge right here, which when you butt your fabric up against it, you'll get an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when I say you'll get an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, you do probably need to do a couple experimental lines of stitching and measure those to make sure that you are getting an accurate 1/4 inch. And if you're not, you can just move your needle over one way or the other, 1 or 2 clicks, and remeasure it, and then put that into your machine as your default. So I'm just going to show you how this sews. I'm going to put it onto my machine. There we go. Simple. And I've gone into the quilting settings of my M7 and clicked on the 1/4 inch setting, which moves my needle over to the right, and I have my straight stitch plate in here so that I won't break my needle. It's very important that you match up your foot plates with your proper needle positioning, because yes, you will break a needle. And ask me how I know. So I've got a couple of pieces of fabric here to represent like doing a quilting block, right sides together, and I've lined up the edge, and all I have to do is just put it under the needle, drop my foot. I didn't need to do that. My Janome would drop my foot automatically when I hit the foot pedal, and sew away. So here we go. Now I've put in blue thread so you can see this on the white background. Take that off. And there you go. Got my thread caught under there, but that's okay. And there's your seam right there. So your 2 pieces of fabric are now sewn together with an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. As I said, I use this foot probably the most of any of my feet, since I am a quilter, and that's what I'm usually doing on my sewing machine. So that's very basic, but definitely available. Now, you can get feet that do not have this edge guide on them, that are set up to in such a way that if you put your foot on top of your fabric right along your edge, you can get your 1/4 inch seam allowance. But I like this better because it keeps my fabric from shifting around, and if you're not a really straight sewer, this will help with that. Okay, so what I want to show you next is what they call the Accu-feed system, or dual feed system. Those two terms are interchangeable. And I showed you a second ago all these pieces that are here. Essentially, you have 2 of these. Now, some machines will come with both of these. Some will come with one. You may have to order one of these. But this is essentially a walking foot. But the way this system works, and I'll hook this up for you and show you, is, first of all, I've got to take off the foot I have on there now and the foot holder. Just put that to the side. And then I'm going to put in my Accu-feed. And there's a little bar. I'm fitting under here. I can't show it on camera because it's in an awkward spot, but you just loosen your screw to get that in, and then push this up, and there's a little bar in here that little hook on the edge goes over. Hold that in, tighten your screw, and a tip, don't over tighten your screws because you will strip them. They just need to be pretty much a little bit more than just finger tight. And while I'm putting that on, here's the other foot, and you can see this one has a 1/4 inch foot already on it. Now it's different from the one I just showed you that had the edge, but that's what I mean. You can get feet like that, barring you don't need this part of it, but you can get feet like this. So you just put your fabric up against that, and that's your guide for your 1/4 inch. Or put it this side, I guess. But I'm not going to bother putting this one on and showing it to you today because it works essentially the same way as this one does. So I have a choice of, let's get them in the shot here, a choice of 3 feet. Now some of these do not come with your sewing machine. You have to buy them as an accessory. You probably will get the open toe one for sure. And the open toe one works just like any open toe foot. But what is the beauty of this? Let me put this to the center position, and I'm going to snap this little foot right in here. That's all there is to that. Let's move those out of our way, and let's take back our little piece here that we have. And let's say this was, well, it is 2 layers of fabric already. Now, depending on the feed dog system on your sewing machine, it may or may not have any problems pulling evenly your 2 layers or 3 layers. In the case of a quilt sandwich, for example, your 3 layers of fabric through evenly. Now, I can choose on this particular machine to engage the full Accu-feed system or not, and I am going to engage it. So I have it there, and it came up with a warning on my machine that you can't see saying make sure you've got the right foot in. I do. And what that does is it's allowing the feed dogs below to work in concert with the feed dogs that are on this little device. So you're pulling your fabric from underneath and on top at the same time, which keeps your layers even, going through your sewing machine at exactly the same time. Again, this is really important when you're doing, say, walking foot quilting on a quilt sandwich, because it'll keep all those 3 layers together. It also is great on slippery fabrics as well, because they do have a tendency to slide all over the place. This will keep a good grip on them, pull them through evenly. So all I do is the same thing as I did with any kind of sewing. Now that it's engaged, and away it goes. And I'm removing my hands. Of course, it's going to go crooked because there's nothing there to stop it from going crooked, but you can see it pulls it through very nicely. Now, it does help that this machine has 12 feed dogs, the most of any Janome machine, I'm pretty much sure of. But that's just a basic stitch. Let's say we want to do a 1/4 inch. Well, we do have an attachment with an edge guide that allows me to do a 1/4 inch seam. So all I do is pop this one out, pop this one in, make sure my thread is out of the way. Make sure I have everything lined up here. Yep, there we go. Go to my 1/4 inch seam setting, and I'll just take the opposite side of this piece for demo purposes, and the same thing. And I don't think I've got my foot in there right. Just bear with me for a second. I didn't have it quite sitting in there in the proper way. Let's try this again. And it pulls it around very nicely, and I've got that edge guide as well to put the edge of my fabric under, and I have my 1/4 inch seam. And there it is. So as I said, this works really nicely if you are using a quilt sandwich. Now, I'm going to show you what I mean by that, because I happen to have a little piece that I've layered with 2 pieces of white fabric, and in between it some batting. And I'm just going to put this under here. Now you can see how thick that is. And it has absolutely no problem pulling my layers through. And don't mind my cutting. My cutting is uneven. It's not my stitching that's uneven. Now let's say that I was doing some stitch in the ditch. Well, there is an attachment for that as well. So again, all we do is pop out the one. And you see, this is why it's a stitch in a ditch. It has this bracket right here that goes right down the center. So you line that bracket up, or your needle, with the seam of your quilt block, and no problem, away you go. Now I don't have a block set up here to show you how this works, but I'm going to put it on anyways just to give you an idea. I'm going to move my needle back to the center position, and let's say this imaginary line right here is my ditch. And you can see this little piece right here will go down into the ditch very nicely and help you to stay pretty much straight, because you know what stitch in the ditch is like. Trying to stay in the ditch is not easy. So this will definitely aid you with that as well. And you can use this for other things too. For example, if I wanted to go about, well, you could use it almost as a 1/4 inch foot if you move your needle, and it won't let me move my needle because I don't have in the plate for that, but I could. Now, speaking of which, let's pop this one out. So I don't know if you're getting it or not from this demo, but what I'm showing you is you have a dual system of feed dogs, which is working on the top of your fabric and on the bottom of your fabric. And if you've got layers, it's pulling all your layers through evenly. So can you use this with, say, a quilting design? Yes, you can. I like to do walking foot quilting with a serpentine, a wavy line stitch. So I'm just going to show you how to do this. Now for this, I have to switch over to this plate because this is my zigzag plate. I cannot use that, the wavy foot, with a straight stitch plate, because guess what will happen? I'll break my needle. And the beauty about the Janome machines, at least the M7, is when I have this foot on here and the plate, it detects which plate is in here, and it'll gray out any of the stitches I cannot use. So that's a great little reminder. So right now my wavy stitch is grayed out. But if I set this up, this is a feature I really like, easy for changing the plates on the M7. And we just pop in the zigzag, and there we go. And now I'm going to put in the right foot. Now I'm going to use the open toe foot with this, because I want to see the stitches. And now I've turned off the Accu-feed system with this, the dual feed. I'm not going to be using the top ones, although they will be bouncing up and down, as you'll see here. It only works with the bottom feed dogs for this, but still,
it gives me a better grip on all my layers than I would get by just using an ordinary open foot for this technique. So I've switched myself over to my wavy line, and here we go. Now usually I wear quilting gloves when I do this just to get a better grip on my quilt, but this is just a little piece, so I don't really have to worry about that. But you can see it's nice, it's consistent. On the back, I have white thread in the back, but you can see it's pulling everything through very evenly, which helps if you've basted your quilt properly, avoiding tucks and things like that. So I love this. I use this all the time on quilts that I want to do walking foot with. Can I do other decorative stitches with this? Well, if I go into my decorative stitches, and yes, I can. Again, I'm only using the top. Just find something interesting here. Let's find little loops. I am only using the bottom feed dogs with this. I'm not using the full dual feed system with it, which is kind of interesting because, well, there is a way to trick the machine, but I'm not going to get into it today. And that would be for really special applications when you need that. But this is enough to handle. So I'm doing a decorative stitch right now. Of course, I've caught my thread underneath this. Sorry about that. I'm going to get past that and then I'll show you what the stitch really looks like here. I'm just doing simple loops. Let's do a couple of more. And let it tie it off. And just ignore the fact that I've got some of my thread caught under that piece, but there you are. And you see how nicely it pulled the fabric through. So that's the Accu-feed system. Once you've used it, you will use it again and again and again. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And as I said, it has more applications just in quilting. If you're using a stretch fabric or something that has, that has a tendency to get caught up in your sewing machine or to, pull here and there, the Accu-feed system really helps with that a great deal. Okay, so that takes me to the next thing that I want to show you, and that's the circular sewing tool. This crazy looking device here. This is a lot of fun to use and can give you some really cool effects on both quilts or on other like applique, things like that. So I'm going to show you how this works. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to remove the Accu-feed system and put back on my bracket for my regular feet. Give that a tighten. And the foot I'm going to use for this is my F foot. Now, I tend to use my F foot that is more of a closed toe. This one has the little red dot for lining up your needle, which is why I like to use it. But there's also the other one that is more open. Oops, didn't hit that right. Okay, I'm in. And I'm going to go into a decorative stitch here in just a second, but now I'm going to install this device. Now, this device has a little ruler on it, and that's for setting up how large of a circle you want to go. I have a piece of fabric set up for this, and it's about an 8-inch square. And on this square, I did put some tearaway stabilizer on the back. You want to stabilize your fabrics when using decorative stitches because they will pull your fabric out of shape if you don't. So I just put some light tearaway stabilizer. I gave it a light spray with some basting spray just to stick it. You don't have to necessarily do that, but I do it for a little extra security. You could baste around it if you wanted to. Now, you pop your little plastic cover over your bobbin case, and you'll notice this has a rectangular piece. This fits, and this is why you need to get the one that's appropriate for your machine, that drops right down into your foot plate. And there's a little hole that you put a screw in up here, and it lines up with this foot plate. Now this is why you need to purchase one of these that is for your particular model of sewing machine. And most of the major sewing machine models, you can get one of these devices. So let me just get out the little screw, and it just goes right down in here. And you don't need to tighten it too much, but I just take out my smaller screwdriver that came with the sewing machine and just give it a little bit of a turn. You don't have to crank it in there. Now, this is where I need to determine where my circle is going to go. So, on this, I have this little top hat here. That's a protective piece because there is a very sharp needle under here. And this is what you're going to use to put in the center of your fabric where you want things to radiate out from. So I'm just going to guess it here for size for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide, this whole thing slides, and there are markings with inches on here. And let's say I'm going to put it at about 7-inch mark. Or actually, I've got it at the 5-inch mark. There's a little arrow down here, lines up with the numbers, and you push this little bracket up. Now this is something I don't like about the design of this, because as you're sewing, this little catch that keeps this in spot can come loose, so watch for that. Stick it under your needle, and of course you would spend more time adjusting this as you go. And when you've got it in the right spot, just be careful, keep your fingers away from this. This is very, very, very sharp. And put your little cap back on as a safeguard. And what I like to do is I just swing this around to make sure I'm in this area that I want to be in. And first of all, let's just try a straight stitch and show you how that works with just an ordinary straight stitch. So let me get my machine set up here. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, well, straight stitch, here we go. And away we go. Maybe a little fast. Now you see, no hands, Mom. Yep. Although I do use my hands to guide it a little bit. But you see this little part in the center acts as a pivot. I just got a perfect circular line of stitching. But let's say I want to do something with a decorative stitch. So I'm just going to move this out a little bit further so you'll be able to see this. And let's pick, let's see, how about an applique stitch? Say I have a circle of fabric here and I want to put a satin stitch or a blanket stitch all the way around it. Then I could lay my circle down here, put it on top of the needle, get it all positioned where my needle is going to go, and use my applique stitch. So let's just take a simple applique and try that. So you can see I'm getting an applique stitch. I'm not going to go all the way around for this time, but I get a nice even blanket stitch using that. And if I've set it up properly, it'll catch my fabric, no problem. But let's go to something more decorative. And let's see what we can find here. How about something that has leaves on it? Okay, let's try this one. See what we get here. You see it? I don't need my hands. I am watching this little cap though to make sure it doesn't spring off. And let's just change the stitch for some variety here. Let's try something like this one. I don't like that one. Let's try something just like this. Okay. And you can see the fun you can have with experimenting and playing around with all of this as well. And let's try something. Let's see. Here's something, a little festive looking leaf. Now, could you use this with the Accu-feed system? Yes, you could. It would hold your fabric down if you had a layer, like a quilting layer. Well, why don't we try that? Okay, let's take this out for a minute. Okay, just finishing this off. And I'll show you what this looks like. Pop that off, put your little protective cap on, and you see? And think about this. You could do circles of decorative stitching radiating out from the center. You can do a lot of things with this, and I have, and it's a lot of fun to use. So it's another way to get a really decorative look by using, the circular sewing device with your decorative stitches. Now, will it work with the Accu-feed walking foot? Well, let's check this out. Because we would have 3 layers of fabric, and trying to keep things going through evenly if you're doing a decorative stitch on something like that is not an easy thing. So we're going to put in the open toe, open toe, foot. Now, I do have my zigzag in here because I'm using a decorative stitch, so I cannot engage the Accu-foot system up here. So I'm just using the bottom feed dogs at the moment. Let's grab my sandwich. And this is not going to be as neat because I don't have a square. It's a rectangle, but this will give you an idea. And I just put it on the way I would do it. Now, could you do this with a whole quilt? No. Obviously, whole quilt won't fit under here. But say you wanted to do quilt as you go, and you're making blocks for a quilt this way, and actually I have done that. Or you can, like for a table runner or something like that, a pillow slip would work as well, because you can go under here as up to about 10 inches, 12 inches. So let's try a different decorative stitch. Let's just try something like, I don't know, a loop. And we're all set up here. And you see, this is pulling 3 layers of fabric. There is no stabilizer on this piece, but it's pulling everything through very evenly, which is helping me avoid tucks. Again, it would depend on how you have actually gone about, sandwiching your layers. Okay, let's just cut that off and take a look at this. And I don't really like that. That wasn't the best one to pick for this. Also, I think my bobbin ran out of thread, but you get the idea. That is one other problem with this. You can't tell how much bobbin thread you've got left because this covers up the bobbin. But that basically is how I use those specialty feet on my Janome machine. And I hope that showed you some possibilities here as well.
So that was our look at some of the feet that we like to use and the different ways you can use them. And I hope you found that useful. But just before we go today, I did get an email from one of our viewers based upon one of our videos we did a while ago about needle sizes. And they gave me a link to a very good video that was made in about 2015, but where this, I don't know what he is, I think he owns a sewing machine shop or something, where he talks about hand sewing needles and how to figure out sizes for that, which I didn't know this, but hand sewing needles don't work quite the same way as the measurements that we told you about for sewing machine needles. So it's about a 5-minute video. The link is in the show notes below, and you can check that out if you're interested. I'm not, because I don't do hand sewing. Do you do hand sewing?
On rare, only when I have to.
Oh, and what would make you have to do hand sewing on a garment besides maybe a button? But
where I don't want it to go through both sides of the garment.
oh, okay, that's a discussion for another day then. We'll just leave that one. Sounds a little bit more involved. So our next topic next week is going to be about transporting your machine and your sewing supplies if you're going to a retreat or to a class. We're going to show you what we have purchased to transport our sewing machines, but also we're going to talk about various ways we pack up our equipment and take it to those kinds of environments, especially in environments where you might be very much crowded into a classroom, which is usually the way it is where we go. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about next week. And as always, if you have any suggestions for future topics on So Chatty, let us know and we'll see what we can do about that. And there are also links, I forgot to mention, we have a links for the Idiot Quilter as well that I just did this past week and put up. And I've done a new segment on the Idiot Quilter. If you haven't noticed it, I'm interviewing some of the people that are regular subscribers. And if you'd like to be interviewed on the Idiot Quilter, my email address is in the show notes. Just drop me a line and we'll discuss it further. So, okay, I think that's everything. Any parting comments, Walter?
Nope.
Well, that's a man of few words. Yeah. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.